An e-commerce client of mine recently asked me a scaling question, specifically actually like what is horizontal versus vertical scaling, when I brought it up to him when he asked me what is the highest thing he can do in the business to actually grow it. So in this video I figured I'd explain this to you because it's a term that you hear getting thrown around all the time in business and e-com, but nobody really has explained it properly, right? Because for example, if you asked someone what is horizontal versus vertical scaling, they would just give you a very niche example like, okay, so vertical scaling is scaling a single individual ad set, whereas horizontal scaling is scaling another ad set simultaneously. Right? But reality is that's not exactly what horizontal versus vertical scaling is, and it doesn't really tell you which one you should be doing at any given point in your business. So here's the reality of what is like horizontal versus vertical scaling. And it's basically how brands get to 100 million a year in revenue. I've had the privilege of being able to work alongside a couple brands that are touching 9 figures in annual revenue. And this is essentially what their entire scaling journey looks like, right? And this applies to any brand. It's not just 9-figure brands, it's 8-figure brands, 7-figure brands, maybe not really 6-figure brands, but you kind of get the point. So if you were to plot revenue on the y-axis and time on the x, you're gonna see that over time revenue goes up, right? But revenue doesn't go up in a linear slope. A lot of the time, what it looks like is a brand is gonna initially start at 0, like every single one does. They kind of scale a little bit, and then they drop, they plateau, and then they scale more, drop, plateau, scale more, drop, plateau, and so on and so forth, right? But at every single stage, they hit a plateau. The key is that they're able to break through the plateau, right? But how does that happen? Well, it happens through horizontal versus vertical scaling, because initially the barrier that you have to kind of break out as a brand is product market fit, right? So we'll call it PMF. Once they actually hit product market fit and kind of start growing, taking a little bit of the market share, what's going to allow them to take a larger percentage of the market is going to be through branding, because it's through branding people build association and brand loyalty. And as a result, they always come back to you. So for example, right, when you think about cotton buds, I know in the US you guys think Q-tips, right? But actually, when I found out, actually Q-tips is a brand of cotton buds. Isn't that crazy? We associate Coke with cola when the drink itself is actually cola, because a lot of different companies produce different types of colas, but everyone calls it Coke. You know what I mean? So branding is really what's going to get people to the stage after product market fit. And the final stage is actually demand creation, meaning that you've already hit your market and you actually need to be the one to create your own demand for your products. So today's video, I'm primarily going to be focusing on 1 and 2, because demand creation is something that's a lot more complicated. So for example, to illustrate demand creation, right, it's kind of like the quote by Henry Ford. He said that if he listened to what people wanted, they would have said a faster horse, when obviously the right move was to build a car. Right? So essentially, when it comes to demand creation, you need to create the product or market your product into something that people who previously did not want it at all and didn't see it as a viable thing now have a strong desire to possess it. However, this is not super relevant, just because whatever market you're really entering, the total addressable market size should be big enough to facilitate your goals, as opposed to you needing to delve into demand creation. So when it comes to PMF and branding, these 2 things alone is pretty much able to get you to 9 figures a year. So let me tell you about how you're going to break past each and every single business plateau when you hit them. So essentially at every single business plateau, what you're going to find is it either happens for one of a few reasons. One of them, for example, being people don't find your way of outreaching to them very engaging, meaning they don't like your ad angles or don't resonate with it. Or maybe it's that your product market fit is not strong enough, or the audience you're targeting is very, very limited. Now, in order to break past every single plateau, you need to first of all identify if it's a market problem or if it's a you as an individual business problem. What do I mean by that? For example, if you take a look at the whole human population, like 8 billion people on planet Earth, not everyone on planet Earth is going to be in your target audience, wouldn't you agree? So essentially there's going to be a ceiling of scale because it's going to get to a certain point where everyone on planet Earth is basically using your product. And that's what you call TAM, total addressable market, meaning every single person in the world that you could possibly reach, right? Obviously this TAM is on a world population level, so this is just a visual representation of roughly what I mean. What I want you to actually do is to apply this concept to a micro scale into your business. So let's talk about the TAM a little bit, right? So everything on this side of the TAM is going to be your total addressable customers, right? Everything on this side is a no-go zone. This is not your target market at all, right? So essentially, you kind of, like this side of the population, you're not targeting at all. Now, when it comes to this side, this is what you'll use to figure out if you should scale horizontally or vertically. So essentially, horizontal scaling means you're trying to reach a bigger portion of the market, whereas vertical scaling is you're inside the same exact market or audience and just trying to scale within that individual market or audience. So essentially, let's pretend artificially your TAM is this red line right here. If, for example, you are between this stage of your total addressable market, it might make sense to scale horizontally, right? However, if you're within kind of like this stage of the market, meaning you're nowhere near hitting your total addressable market, it means you have a lot more room to scale vertically. There's kind of like a weird zone right here. Like if you're kind of in that zone, but it's going to be very, very difficult to, let's say, grow another 20% within your current market, it might also make sense for you to scale vertically right here. Because essentially, if you're this side of this like invisible TAM line, it means that you have way more potential inside your current market or audience to actually scale. That's why they call it vertical scaling. You're scaling along the same vertical line that you've been going on. Whereas horizontal scaling on this side is if you're meeting your TAM or close enough to the point where the additional juice is not really worth the squeeze, going into a new market, testing a different product, targeting a different audience would essentially help you get there because it kind of like moves the goalpost a little bit on the TAM side of things. So that's effectively what horizontal or vertical scaling is, but how do we actually go about implementing it? So instead of kind of talking in generalities, I'll just take the example of one of my clients' brands right here. They're a jewelry brand, and this was the guy that asked me kind of this question, right? And I'll take their unique selling points and go over examples of vertical versus horizontal scaling that they would perform on their business. So just to give you some context, right? It's a jewelry brand that's like a bracelet where there's like a little gem in it, and then there's like, it helps you save the memory of a special someone or something. That's the big idea of the product, right? It helps you memorialize something. Right now, the scale that they're at has been achieved through advertising around like losing a loved one. That's kind of like their biggest ad hook right now, where it's like, whether it be a grandma, grandpa, uncle, auntie, mum, dad, whatever, passing, and then the customer wants to like memorialize them instead of, I don't know, getting like their name tattooed or whatever. They would essentially buy this piece of jewelry and start wearing it. Right? That's kind of the big idea that's unlocked this level of scale for the brand. Now, the founder basically was just like, yo, like, I really don't know where to go in terms of scaling this. Do I go into other markets or other countries like Germany and US? Or do I try to maybe test new products or, maybe test new ad angles? Because everyone and their mums and cats will tell you like, oh, if you want to scale an e-com, you have to test new creatives. It's a creative game, it's a creative game, it's a creative game, blah, 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 right? That's true for the most part. However, like, what are you testing in terms of new creatives, right? It's like, without understanding this, you don't really know how to actually innovate in terms of brand direction and everything along those lines. So essentially, we had a little bit of a brainstorming session, right, about how to actually grow his business. And I was advising him on choosing vertical scaling as opposed to horizontal, because I knew for a fact that like numerically it's impossible that he's at his total addressable market. Like he was telling me shit like, yo, like I think this is the cap and I don't know if I can scale it more. And I was just like, bro, you just need to get out there more and see that people are scaling in even smaller markets. And you're just like, there's so many things wrong right now, right? Vertically that you haven't explored to be able to say that this is the limit of where your market potential is. But also, there's literally examples of other jewelry brands with niche, unique selling points like this at a much bigger scale than him, right? So yeah, anyways, in terms of vertical scaling, an example would be, innovating on the angle or the hook of creatives, because that allows you to reach more of the same exact audience, aka allowing you to scale vertically, right? So what do I mean by using different angles and different hooks? Well, to understand how to actually innovate your hooks and angles, you have to first of all really understand what the big idea of your brand is. Meaning that, for example, in this case, the big idea is saving the memory of a loved one and being able to carry that love with you wherever you go. But really, if I were to eliminate something from this, it's like saves a memory, right? It doesn't necessarily even have to be a loved one. So essentially, once you understand the big idea behind your brand and your product, you can start coming up with different angles. So the way I told him to think about it was like, look, you're memorializing uncles, aunties, grandpas, grandmas, right? But what about pets? So I'm gonna pop an ad on screen right now that I saw that was like pretty fucking hilarious, to be honest. When I saw this, I showed this ad to him because this was the exact type of example I was talking about, right? Like he was very gung-ho about saving the memory of a loved one in terms of it being human, but actually stepping back a little bit, you can go into the pet space, right? And then I told him the framework in which I come up with these things, because it gets a bit more fucked up from here, because I was like, okay, the core idea is loved ones and people that you love, right? What about targeting mothers who go through miscarriages, right? You could implement in the ad like a CT scan of a mother's child, showing them going through a miscarriage. Obviously, these are very like emotive points to hit, and your brain has to work in a certain way to be able to come up with this shit. But like, that would be an example, right? So going after people who have dying pets, miscarriage mothers. So that would be examples of exploring the bigger idea further of saving a memory of a loved one. However, if we were to remove the loved one part, think about like what types of memories would you want to memorialize, right? It could be the day that you graduated, it could be a graduation thing. It could be your kid's birthday, right? It could also be things like the day that you got married. It could be a wedding photo, right? The whole point is, this explores the big idea of the product, which is to save a memory of something and anything. Now, once you understand the different angles, this is where you actually can start building your hooks. Because what I hear a lot of brand owners on Twitter and these kind of spaces tell you is like, oh yeah, you gotta test new creatives, write better hooks, it's always about the hook and blah, blah, blah. But the problem is, without understanding the core angle and the core unique selling points of your product, you don't really know how to like innovate on a hook that's already working, right? And what ends up happening a lot of the times is people just rewrite the same exact hook, but just in different words. Yes, that can work, but doing it like this will literally be able to 10x your creative output. In terms of, if you were to hit a big test, that test is gonna scale you like no other. So when it comes to writing hooks, right, the way I like to think about it is, I like to take high-performing hooks that are working in other verticals already, and then just bring them over. So in the ad I showed you earlier about like showing like the dog literally dying in the person's arms and then introducing the product, right? My brain went to so many different places with this, but like you can kind of take that same concept of a very emotive event, because the big idea around that is like, a dog is dying and people are like looking at what's up, and that's the hook, right? So it's like generating a lot of emotion through loss. So you could literally bring that and apply it to everything else. I don't know if you've seen on, for example, TikTok when they run ads to raise money for like GoFundMes, and they literally film like a person dying in like a hospital bed, you know, like, and then it's like donate, blah, blah, this is my father, da, 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 right? That could be the hook for this product, you know? Want to memorialize a loved one? Boom, this is the product. So that's how you actually generate hook ideas. And once you have those hook ideas, that's what you send to the creative team. Not just like, oh, right now it's like I don't know if it's a UGC ad saying, oh my God, my life changed when I found this skincare, and then you rewrite that hook to my life took a turn once I found this skincare. You see what I mean? Like, that's not really testing new hooks. This is figuring out new hooks and testing them. So that's pretty much vertical scaling, right? Figuring out ways to resonate with the same exact market at a higher rate to unlock more scale and capture more of that market vertically. Now let's talk a bit more about horizontal scaling, because this was something that my client was also very, very interested in. So horizontal scaling is exactly what it sounds like. It means you're going sideways. You're going into adjacent markets, adjacent audiences, things along those lines, right? And when you're scaling horizontally, it always comes down to either product or audience. So here's the problem that I see with most brands, right? Is on this side, which is like, they have their hero product, HP, and then they try to figure out a completely different hero product as well to try to crack that, with no overlap in terms of potential audience. How you really scale horizontally the correct way is really to figure out, like, this, for example, is your current market size, and then you figure out what is the intersection between another one, because then you have an overlap of audiences interested in both products, right? So if you do it this way, what's gonna happen is you're not gonna have as much operational complexity as if you did it this way. As with most brands, what they end up happening when they try to scale horizontally into different products is that they end up just building a different, totally brand new business, because their mailing list isn't going to resonate with this new product. Their current creative teams might not know how to advertise it. And a big example of this is, for example, when like a women's fashion brand tries to go into the male fashion game, or vice versa. Or for example, when a wellness supplement tries to go into, let's say, the fitness supplement space, like a brand that sells like ashwagandha, mushrooms, and that kind of stuff, suddenly turning and selling protein powder. It makes no sense. So essentially, when it comes to scaling horizontally, there's two ways to go about it. You can either launch a new product, or you can take the same existing product and go into a different audience. Personally, I always advise brand owners to go into a different audience, because I guarantee the demand for your product, if you're watching this, is not fully tapped out yet. What do I mean by going into a different audience, right? So going back to the jewelry example, the big idea of this bracelet is to memorialize the loved one. But what if I told you that that big idea is not the only big idea behind this product? You know, it's just the other big ideas haven't been discovered. What do I mean by this? Because when I looked at this product, right, it's in the jewelry space, and there's so many ways to market jewelry. Like, the way in which they do it is basically they insert like a photo into the bracelet that you have to like really squint your eyes to be able to see, right? Like, it's a big close-up thing. And I told him, like, why does it have to be a photo? Why can't it be like astrology, right? Reading the birth charts of people and putting it inside the bracelet, because that essentially is the same exact product, doesn't change anything on the supply chain. You just print a different thing. So that would essentially unlock a different audience, the astrology crowd. Now, astrology itself is a pagan belief, right? Which made me think, what about the biblical crowd? Can you unlock those people? You know, what if you put a Bible verse in this? So essentially, I just came up with two different audiences that he could test with that would substantially increase his total addressable market. You see what I mean? So that's how you scale horizontally on the audience side, but what about the product? When it comes to scaling into different products, a big mistake that a brand makes is they try to pick only a complementary product when they should pick a complementary hero product. What do I mean by this? Well, the thing that's actually going to drive the scale for any brand when it comes to launching new products is if the product has what I call like top of funnel potential, meaning that you could run ads on the new product and get sales profitably on first purchase. So essentially, when it comes to looking at different products, think about the marketing for it as well. Don't just think, okay, I'm selling elbow pads, let's say as a really random example. So my audience would absolutely want knee pads, right? That's not how it necessarily works, because knee pads might not have the same top of funnel potential as the elbow pad. So yes, some of your audience would want the knee pad too, but that's more of a post-purchase upsell. I really want you guys to be prioritizing top of funnel potential, because if a product doesn't have top of funnel potential, best case, you're gonna be able to send 10, 20, maybe 25 if you're lucky, percentage of your current customers into the new product. But the idea is to launch a new product and double, triple, or even 10x the brand. You see what I mean? So when it comes to thinking through new product ideas, what I really want you to think about is like, what is another product that I can advertise to my same exact audience, as opposed to think in the framework of like, what is a product that would be a good post-purchase upsell? So going back to that jewelry example, right? People who really like bracelets might also resonate with a necklace around the same exact idea. You see how it didn't just say like a necklace with like a bigger photo on it? It's like the big idea is this very cutesy, small way to represent a memory or a loved one, right? Which is why a necklace would work so well, because you can say it's closer to the heart. You know what I mean? So essentially, that's how you scale horizontally into different products and audiences. So now you know the difference, where to use each method and how each method works. Thank you guys for watching. If you want me to help you grow your brand, book in a call with my team and we'd love to speak to you soon.